I'm sure you know, and many of your listeners know, the Skinny Girl brand. The
Yes.
Oh,
Skinny
sure.
Girl.
Yeah.
Bethenny
Okay.
Frankel.
Yeah.
So exactly. Okay, so fun fact. You guys are all about the backstory on business. Bethenny Frankel, when she came up with this idea of a low-calorie, good-tasting cocktail, she went and pitched it to every single liquor manufacturer in the country, every single major liquor one. And not to be sexist, but every one of those companies turned her down, and every one of those companies is headed by men. And again, not to be sexist, but just to put it out there, men don't typically have to count calories as much as women do. And so she went ahead on her own. She was turned down by every one of these companies. She went ahead on her own, found the funding for it. And 2 years later, Beam, as in Jim Beam, bought her company back from her for $100 million. So the company that turned her down initially, 2 years later, buys that company, that same idea and concept and brand back for $100 million. The same thing that probably would have cost them $500,000 to start with. And what I believe, and that's an example in my book, is that that was a failure of perspective. If they had had a woman sitting around the table or on their board when Bethenny was going in and pitching this, and maybe all these guys are like, I don't really think there's a market for that. I promise you, a woman would have said, excuse me, there is absolutely a market for this. Are you kidding? We would love this. And because it was all men, I chalk that up to a failure of perspective. And that's the kind of mistake that companies don't want to make. You might miss something big if you don't have that perspective. So I think the diversity and inclusion teams are incredibly important in companies, but that D word, I do find it, people have what I call diversity fatigue. They're just over it.
Oh,
That
yeah.
word.
You know, Kelly, I've been sitting here thinking about that example you gave of calling someone up on stage and pointing out things that are like, you're wearing a blue shirt, I'm wearing a red shirt, we're different. But what you actually end up doing with that exercise, which I think is fascinating, you're not saying it, but you're actually creating all the commonality that people have, right? Because the little differences you're pointing out, we're all like, of course someone's different. If you have a car, if you drive that car and I drive this car, they're different. But we both drive. I mean, that's the underlying thing you're getting at, is we're conducting business, we're doing this. I think it's a very wonderful point.